Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm here today with David Roberts. Dave, welcome to the pod.
Great to be on here, James. Thanks for inviting me. Long time listener, first time caller.
Oh dear. So Dave is commercial director here at Rocket, hence the very familiar and witty response to being introduced to the pod. So works with our key clients and prospective clients to devise the best approach to solving their digital problem. He's been at Rocket since day one in 2017. And prior to that, 5 years at the web showroom working in the CMS and tech space. So I thought, Dave, it's long overdue having you on the pod and a topic I thought, an area which I think you're particularly interested in. And I think an area where you have a perspective, a really interesting perspective is like using digital to find your audience. So when I thought of that topic, I thought it'd be great to have you on. So I think where I'd like to steer the conversation first is to Google. And we have a weekly staff meeting at Rocket, and it was something that a member of our paid search team, it was a throwaway comment by him, I reckon 2 years ago, where he basically said, Google Ads is no longer about search, it's about audiences. And I've been showing my age, doing Google AdWords and into Google Ads since the kind of early 2000s into the early noughties. And it had always been search driven, right? It was very much someone would come to someone like Rocket and you do keyword research. How many people search for that product? We can get you there for an estimated CPC of X. And it was kind of almost as simple as that. And the comment made from our team member really made me think, it's actually true in the sense of there's a broader Google Ads product now, and it isn't just search, but even within search, often a lot of the good work being done is to move bids around and move strategy around depending on the people seeing your ad, not necessarily the term itself. I think it'd be good to talk Google ad targeting because I do think that is something where people's perception of what Google Ads is often very limited. And I think it is something that people have this connection of, Google Ads, search ads, but it is so much more than that. And this isn't us shilling for Google, but I think genuinely like the product, the power behind the product and what it is these days and how it is best used.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, whenever I talk about, who our Google Ads team is these days, I never focus just on that search component. It is a multidisciplinary skill set these days, covering search, shopping, display, YouTube, discovery ads. There's always this whole gamut of great products that Google releases. And I think, talk about finding audiences and how you can do that in Google. I guess display and YouTube are a good way to maybe kind of unpack that a little bit. So probably going back, if you're talking into like 2019 or 2020, running display ads, maybe outside of remarketing ads, display prospecting was a quick way to burn a lot of money for not a lot of results. It was something that us as performance marketers would steer clear of. But as Google got much better in knowing your digital audiences, it becomes a much more powerful tool. So,
and I think maybe before you go into that, I think it is worth. So I think this is often something that people don't connect the dots on, which is Google knows everything about us. Google, probably 30%, 40% of the Australian population are on Android phones. Most of us are using Google Maps. Many of us are using YouTube. Most of us now have a Google account because we're accessing Gmail or YouTube or whatever it might be. And as a result, Google is building up these incredibly rich portraits of us as users. They know what websites we visit. They know geographically where we are. They know if we viewed an ad, if we then go into a retail environment. They know what music we're into. They know if we're buying a house, if we've sold a house. They have all this data, which then, I think, Dave, where you're probably going with it, is then how we as marketers can access that data to then build up really interesting and relevant audience segments.
Yeah, exactly right. So it has all of that super powerful demographic and behavioral data on us as internet users, as prolific internet users. So it can very much tailor. It knows what we're interested in, where we're at, our life cycle stages, as you mentioned. And it's also got all of that search intent data as well, which I really love. One of the great features I love when we're talking about audiences is the custom intent audiences targeting feature available in Google. So you can now say, based off, a particular keyword that maybe James has entered on Google, and websites that these people have visited, or competitors' websites, or mobile apps that they've gone to. Can you build me out a cohort audience which kind of matches these things? So if I'm looking to sell a car and I've been to carsales.com or CarMall, or any of these kind of sites, you can start building out an audience. It's never directly to that person. Obviously, there's privacy around that, but Google can build out good cohorts of people who match certain segments that we can plug into the system. And that then allows us as marketers and working with our brands to say, let's show this display ad to this cohort of people. Let's show, this cohort, some YouTube advertising, or whatever it may be. So it's a really powerful tool to unlock all of that big data that Google has on a more bespoke level, from a brand standpoint, to start getting those audience, getting our message in front of those audiences.
Yeah, and I think we found that so if I think if you're in an area, and this is where the creativity comes in, right? If you're in an area where your audience is very niche, very hard to find, we can build up audiences of people that have searched for, in aggregate, have searched for your 5 biggest competitors. Or if you're trying to hit professionals in a certain segment, people that have been to in the industry association website, or have been to the main trade publications, or have searched for those products. I was doing a presentation for a client in a particular, I guess, trades adjacent space, and in market for their particular product wasn't perfect. So we build up a bucket of users who have actually searched in Google search for their particular product or service, and then show ads to those people as they jump onto YouTube or, browse
Yeah.
around the internet.
Yeah, very powerful. And it'd be, so interesting to see how this all plays out into the future as well, because whilst, this sounds really, powerful now, I'm sure in time, it probably won't even be a feature that we'll use. When you look at, Meta, historically, you had all of those powerful interest-based targeting mechanisms in the platform, which was one of the differentiating factors of Meta to Google back then. You could say, hey, I want to target people who with income of X and we're interested in X, Y, and Z. And as kind of privacy laws change, a lot of those interest-based targeting mechanisms get removed from the ad platform, and it starts to move into more of a big data, AI model. So with Meta Advantage Plus, and it's just basically using aggregate data and its algorithm to find users for you. So you just say, these are the people I want to buy, or want to buy my product, or get my advertising in front of. And I'm sure with Google, it's going to be a very similar model where it's probably less input from a digital specialist standpoint, and then that's when your creative becomes the key driving performance in terms of getting ad results.
Yeah, that's it. And it's sort of interesting. We because like as you touched on, that was always the knock on Google, is that Facebook has this incredible targeting capability, household income, particularly in North America, where you get access to data, political persuasion, all these kinds of things, with all the Cambridge Analytica business and the development of the Google product, Facebook, and particularly with the interaction with iOS 14. Facebook went through this phase of, I think, of a lot of campaigns, particularly ones that were set and forget, kind of stopped working as well as they once did. And there was probably this lull, but I think it's been really interesting for us there's all this noise that TikTok, is killing Google, is killing Facebook rather, Meta's dead. I was presenting recently some kind of top level data, and Facebook still has 16.5 million Australians accessing the platform on a monthly basis. They're accessing it for less time than TikTok. TikTok, the last data we have, was less than 10 million Australians using it, but obviously growing very heavily. But as an agency, I think we probably, from a paid perspective, see our clients getting better results from Facebook than they do from TikTok. And to your point, like a lot of the new targeting, more of the kind of algorithm driven targeting capabilities in Facebook and Instagram are actually working really, really well.
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely seen some really interesting case studies on Advantage Plus with a few of our clients there. So, it's it's a shifting dynamic all the time. So it's just about where the right place to be is. And it's interesting you touch on TikTok. So, James, I'd be really interested to hear your view. I mentioned a few things I like custom intent audiences on Google. Have you seen anything yourself? You do a lot of these conversations with clients as well, and talk to our digital team. What other targeting mechanisms have you seen on Google that you like?
In preparation for today, I brought up, we have access to all the different ways that you can target an ad within the Google product stack. And so I kind of brought up 3 spreadsheets, just to add a little bit of kind of real world storytelling, I guess, to the data. So in terms of demographic, like obviously, and maybe not obviously, but you can target people based on geography, age, gender. But within Google, it gets to a point of education, kind of level of education. You can target that way. They do have some pretty light employment type stuff, which is the company size, whether they work large employer, small employer, and then certain industry, construction, education, finance, healthcare, hospitality. Definitely not as granular as LinkedIn, which we'll get into shortly. Home ownership status, whether you're a homeowner, whether you're a renter, in a relationship, married, and then parents and parents of children 6 to 12, 0 to 1, 4 to 5. So you build up some pretty good demographic data within Google. And then obviously you can upweight what you're willing to bid in Google search ads for that. But you can also then target users in YouTube, display, etc. In terms of, I think in markets one, which is really, really interesting, and there are some limitations that basically Google have display, Gmail, discovery, search, shopping, and video. And some of these segments aren't available across all, but the majority are. But in terms of in market, there's often a misconception that it's only B2C. There's lots of really good B2B. I think there is one, for instance, in our space. There's one for SEO services.
Correct.
And I'll just yell out a few of them. And I think users, if they want, they can reach out to us for more information. But if you're in kind of fashion, there's running apparel, yoga apparel, backpacks, costumes, eyewear, formal wear, bridal wear. It kind of goes into that level of granularity. In cars, they basically have every single car manufacturer is its own in-market audience.
Nations, I believe, is a big one that they have. So looking to go on a trip to Paris or wherever it may be. Yeah.
100%. New cars, used cars. There's probably about 100 different
A lot of
segments.
business services in there, in product for various SaaS products, CRM products,
And that's
accounting services.
100%. I think that's a big misconception. Yeah, marketing services, SEO and SEM services, financial services, CRM, enterprise software, cloud storage, web services, domain name registrar. There's hundreds of different in market. So consumer electronics, everything you could imagine. So I'm kind of scrolling down this spreadsheet. There's over what I'm looking at here. Yeah, there's like just under 800 segments that you can build an audience of based on those people being in market for that product. And I think if you remember that Google knows everything we search for, all the websites we go to, it builds up a really accurate portrait of whether someone is interested in those types of products or services. And then they have the concept of affinity, which is very much, I think, an old school marketing, TV advertising type.
Newsreaders and
That's
and whatnot. Yeah.
100%. So there's over 150 different affinity segments. And as you said, like frequently visit salons, food and dining, cooking enthusiasts, pet lovers, book lovers, esports fans. So if you're lucky enough to operate in an area where you've got an affinity segment for you, I think to your point before, hence the importance of understanding the buyer journey. Like, what is that journey that your customers go on?
Yeah.
And then you can target advertising to them at the right time.
And it's quite funny on the affinity audience as well, because I think a lot of brands, this is again, maybe an area which is underutilized, don't necessarily know what the affinity segments are for their particular audiences. We work with a interesting fintech product. We're doing some advertising on Quantcast in there, which is it's a good tool. You can put the pixel on the website and it starts showing you trending keywords and websites visited from your users on that website. It basically builds up a picture of affinity audiences. And one of the interesting takeaways from that was that there was a really over-indexing audience in terms of people who were into the NRL and NRL tipping, or it indexed really, really highly amongst their particular audience. So again, that would be an affinity audience which could potentially be leveraged, from this particular business. Yeah.
It's really interesting. So hoping for listeners that if you previously kind of felt Google Ads was search and maybe a bit of remarketing and retargeting to the side of it, it's definitely not how we're using it as an agency. We definitely think audience first. And that doesn't mean that search won't be still a huge lever for certain clients in the space, but it does come down to that push and pull marketing, right? Where if you're tapped out in search, or if people don't really search for something, the product or service that you have, but you have a really rich idea of your prospective customers, then you need to take the message out to them, right? And this can be a highly effective way of doing it.
Yeah, and it can also be more cost effective to a certain degree as well. So, display can be a very cost effective means in terms of getting the message out there, and Google can be a a somewhat cheaper channel, say compared to like if you're in a B2B mindset and you think you can only advertise on LinkedIn, which can get quite expensive from a CPM standpoint, you can certainly get some really valuable impressions using these types of audience segmentation techniques with your audience on Google.
Good point. What are you seeing in terms of Meta? We've touched on it a little bit, but like the kind of big changes there. What's working, what's not working, misconceptions out there in the market?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the move away from interest, or the slow move away from interest based targeting in Meta is definitely an interesting one. Um, I think it's hard to talk about Meta without mentioning TikTok in terms of the shift in demographics. I speaking to a lot of businesses, knowing different cohorts which work well on Meta. I think you'd have to be I think it's very reasonable to say you've got a much older, more engaged demographic, which is likely to convert on the Meta platform. So, working with some property clients, it still works really well. Particularly people looking to target the over 45 crowd across kind of Instagram and Facebook, they have a much higher propensity to convert on Meta. I think if you're looking to get into the Gen Z market, it's just a platform to be on anymore. Obviously, TikTok is just the more prolific advertising platform, and it's got
I was doing some research recently on that, and this doesn't include under 18s in TikTok's numbers, but it shows that um, 38% of users are 18 to 24 in TikTok. And then if you go under 34, you're looking at 30, 50, 67, about 70% TikTok users are under 34,
yeah.
which kind of speaks to that, right?
But I think the big stat is really time on platform as well. So whilst you like it might count as being a logged on user in these kind of high meta numbers, I think the time on platform last time I looked was like 4 to 5 times greater on TikTok. So it's a much more engaging platform in that sense. But yeah, going back to your initial point, what are we seeing on Meta? I think like obviously the move into more AI driven targeting segments is really big, and we'll see more and more of that coming along. Um, then it's just like Google, it's the use of first party proprietary data, whenever possible. Trying to get proper conversion tracking happening, using Metacopy, I think is extremely important. And then it's just about getting good ad creative on the platform. So if you can get good ad creative and it's relevant to your demographic on Instagram or Facebook, you have a high chance of success.
The reality is that if you have a really clear idea of who you're targeting, you you then will be much more segmented in terms of the way you run your campaigns in Facebook, in TikTok, in Google Display and YouTube. And it's no exaggeration in terms of the impact that having creative that actually resonates deeply with an audience segment. And I think it prevents just a kind of a spray and pray type approach. I think until you properly understand who you're trying to target, it becomes very easy just to put a piece of creative out that you think is good.
Yeah.
Like it's just that you'll never get the results than if you actually segment it up and put creative in front of people that's highly relevant to them.
100%, 100%. That is the key to success in that people don't want to be sold to either. They want to be engaged. They want to be entertained, particularly on a social platform. So you've got to have that message, which is going to stop someone mid scroll. It's going to give them something interesting to think about. It's going to give some sort of emotional connection to your brand. And, that's the key to success. The other point I was going to raise, I guess, just more from an agency standpoint with Meta is just the interplay cross channel in terms of how it works. And, Meta will always have overinflated numbers in terms of conversion data in platforms. Some people like to rely on them. Some people don't. Some people don't think it's a great platform. But I think time and time again, when we kind of look at the overall spends into say prospecting campaigns into Meta and how that has an uplift in the overall, marketing efficiency ratio, for a particular business. So uplift in brand conversions coming through organic direct. There's nearly always a positive correlation between spend in platform on social, in particular, Meta, which is where the bulk of advertisers still sit. You'll see increased spend here, resulting in just more conversions across these other channels. So I'm still a big believer in the platform, so much as the environment changes. I know you can still reach good audiences, put a good message there. They don't convert on the platform. Things like, I don't think lead generation ads are really worth time in platform.
Never work, yeah.
It's just don't work. But you certainly can get, in terms of old school advertising touch point, getting the message out in front of our key audience and then hoping they'll convert, later down the path. You definitely see a positive correlation there.
That's it. Yeah. Then so in saying lead gen ads don't work, they definitely work from a high conversion rate, but then generally to sale that they're terrible.
Well,
Um, and it's really interesting because I think if you'd spoken to most experienced marketers or digitally savvy marketers or agency people 2, 3 years back and said, what do you think of Facebook reporting versus Google Analytics reporting? Everyone would kind of be very dismissive of the Facebook reporting and say like your GA is your kind of, it's your Bible. That's the thing to rely upon. But I think it's definitely becoming much more apparent that they're both showing different numbers based on the way that two very different platforms synthesize data. And GA4, this movement towards data-driven attribution, all the privacy issues that we have, the number. It's important to stress that the data you see, the numbers you see, are often their estimates. They're not actually accurate, and there is a lot of lots of theory and lots of studies that kind of show that your GA4 will often overinflate the last click or the clicks very close to the last click, bottom of the funnel paid activity. And whether by design or because it's almost impossible to measure this stuff, a lot of the top of the funnel stuff is very difficult to measure or gets underweighted. So I think we've become much more, I think, flexible in kind of looking at what Facebook has to say, looking at what Google has to say, trying to get other data points, trying to get, better heard of us data, better market research to actually truly build up a picture as to what's working and what's not.
yeah, and there's always that element you have to trust your gut a bit as well. What you think works. So I always encourage people to you know, see what's going on down here and make a value call. Or if
Yeah, that's it. We're definitely moving away from I will make every decision based on data. It's a really good way to make really bad decisions. So it's kind of be data informed, but allow it to balance with actual, yeah, but like gut is not a bad thing. And we're very happy to challenge business owners and marketers that say they're going to make every decision based on data because often it's a pretty flawed way of going about things.
yeah, right.
In terms of TikTok, I guess anything else, like I think you're right, like demographically, it's definitely skewing younger, but like all these platforms, they get older as
Always,
yeah.
always older. Yeah. I'm
You-
41. I'm on the platform. Actually, I really like the content on there and see, lots of older content creators. So
Yeah.
I definitely know.
TikTok ads, maybe worth just touching a little bit. I mean, it's kind of a similar variant of
Yeah,
addressable
TikTok ads.
targeting, but
What's what's the positive? From what we see, it's quite cheap. So it's this is I guess a point in terms of some marketers can be kind of slow to move, particularly bigger brands. So like, how do we get on TikTok? What's the right type of content? How do we feed the content machine on there? And there's just often people put up these kind of barriers to entry to actually getting on the platform, but you don't necessarily need to do, too much to actually get on platform as a whole. Our social, digital team can talk to you about different options in terms of how you can use content creators or your own content or whatever it may be to actually just get advertising on the platform. But what we do see is very cheap CPMs because it's definitely not as competitive from an advertising standpoint. So that's kind of a tick number one that I like about the platform. It's cheap. It's a great way to drive volume. Number two, what I like about it is that it's kind of got that YouTube element in the sense that your advertising is both audio and visual. So people will typically scroll, Facebook, Instagram, often sound off is, I guess, the go-to for many people who are using the platform. But TikTok is invariably, it's an audio-driven platform. So you have a more opportunity to engage from an advertising standpoint. So I really like that about the platform as well. So I think, when you're talking cheaper costs, more ability to engage with your audience. I think that's two really good ticks in terms of why you should be on the platform. Obviously, it's got increasing market share all the time. It's got good dwell rates in terms of platform usage, and it's just going to keep growing in terms of people on the platform, and eventually it'll get to a point like Meta where it probably gets saturated from an advertising standpoint and diminishes from the I guess the usability of the platform, but I guess as marketers, we see it being underutilized, and it's got lots of scope for brands to get on there. It's just about not being afraid to a certain degree, and you have to be able to walk away from your brand identity because I think if you don't have TikTok driven content to a certain point,
yeah,
then you're not going to work. But you can't just go like many brands who just be up. Here's my remarketing ads from display. I'm going to chuck them onto Facebook as well. I'm going to chuck them onto TikTok. Like that's just not going to be
100%.
which works. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I want to move the conversation now towards programmatic, which I think is also an area probably a recurring theme here where I think a lot of like what used to work 5 years ago or what didn't work 5 years ago isn't necessarily the same now.
Mhm.
And for marketers, I think particularly marketers that might have worked bigger end of town, say 5 years ago, the word programmatic has kind of sometimes come with a pretty dirty kind of connotation. But I think good to talk programmatic. 'Cause I don't think it'd be a good, a deep conversation about how to find your ideal prospect online if you're not talking about programmatic targeting. So maybe just quickly talking about what it is and then potentially talking about maybe an example. I think Quadcast is a good one,
Yeah.
just as to how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the first important distinction when we talk about programmatic, like so programmatic advertising buying is just another way to buy, ad inventory. I don't profess to be a media buyer, but so I won't go into the details of how the various DSPs work or whatever it may be. But I think the most important distinction for marketers to know is programmatic is not just buying display inventory outside of the Google display network, which is maybe how a lot of people used to or potentially still think about the platform. It's a way you can now access, I think, a far greater inventory of digital ad, which is what really excites me about it. So, you can now buy digital out of home, you can buy elevator, you can buy, I think probably most excitingly is, connected TV and BVOD, so broadcaster video on demand. Think about your KOs, your 10 play, 9 now, 7 plus, all this really kind of premium inventory on television, which used to be a super high barrier to entry when you're buying the direct deals, buying TVC. You need to have super high level, TVC level production, massive ad buys with the television stations. Now you can buy on very small budgets, with reasonable level video production and get your message out there. And I think why that's really important is that I think for many people looking at digital ad inventory, you get that kind of almost that switch off unless it's really great content. People know that the barrier is low for any business to advertise on a digital platform. So it's like, yeah, you see a Facebook ad, you see some remarketing ads, and you're almost, you're tuned to blocking a lot of it out unless it's really good. So it's like, how much impact can it have unless it's been done really well? Whereas I think people don't necessarily know from a, say, connected TV standpoint, you're buying premium inventory and people really trust that. So if you're a brand going, hey, I'm now on here, I'm advertising on KO or whatever it may be, that really presents like it builds a lot of trust,
Mm.
for your brand. A lot of people trust that going, hey, this is a proper business. They're out there on TV. So it's a really good way you can actually build up your brand. So you can buy that inventory programmatically. And I guess why that's important and how it's different to how it used to be is you now have all of that data and reporting which can sit behind it as well. So when we're talking about audiences, something like Quadcast has a lot of really interesting AI-driven ways in which it can find your audience based off pixels on your website and device IDs, the whole kind of complex realm in ways in which it can find your digital audience and report back onto you, where previously you just be kind of looking at sales uplift from people who would watch, segments. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
that's it. Like I think when we speak to our clients about it, we'll use the analogy of if you're trying to sell fishing equipment, back in the day, you'd try to get, your ad showing during Rex Hunt or something like that. These days, we're using all like very similar techniques to what we've just spoken about with Google, et cetera. So programmatically, we can using platforms like the Trade Desk, like Quadcast and other ones, we can, if we're B2B, Oracle have a database that feeds in, and then we will only be serving ads to devices that are connected with that financial planner or that person that works in, some obscure, difficult B2B niche. You can plug in Flybuys data, MasterCard, Visa data. There's all these different data points at Quadcast, which is a partner of Rockets. They have pixels on millions and millions and millions of websites around the internet, millions of apps. I think second only to Google. So they have incredibly rich data on who we are as users, similar to what Google has. And then to your point, Dave, then you can find people that are interested in fishing and then just show them your ad when they're in KO or in Nine Now or
Just watching
doing
any
something else.
TV. So yeah, they might be watching Love Island and there might be a CEO and that's
So Dave's favorite show, Love Island. Didn't deny it.
we can do a separate segment about that if you like.
But
But yeah,
it is kind of a, I think we've touched on it earlier on. It's just you're limited by your creativity, right? As to understanding the technology, understanding the different audience sets that we have, and then okay, well, what is contextually the best place to be showing creative to those people?
yeah, that's right. So it's I think it's just maybe like on the agency behalf in terms of say, hey, these are new opportunities that you as a business can now leverage. You don't need huge budgets and talking about transparency in the tools and how they work and where your media actually goes and and how it works. And I think just by having those conversations with customers, you unlock a whole range of new potentials and new channels, but it all works within that whole digital ecosystem and gives people what they like because people like digital because it is metric driven to a certain degree and you can still have a lot of that flowing back into reporting frameworks and having some really interesting data come through that you can make decisions on. So we can find the right audiences, we can report on it, we can see how uplift works. You can see what placements we're getting. I think it's all of that is powerful, and I love it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's it. And it does feel like we've kind of gone from digital, meaning Google, meaning SEO, meaning Facebook and Instagram, and now connected TV. Suddenly, it's the main device in the house. We kind of had that with YouTube, but it was always like, yeah, but are you really watching YouTube on the main device?
Mhm.
Now people are, but it's also connected TV. It's literally the way that people are watching TV, and then even outdoor advertising, right? As to we're now programmatically buying outdoor advertising in really creative ways.
And shopping malls and bus shelters, lots of really good things you do. So if you've got a kind of a geo-targeted campaign, you can blast an area. And I know with Quantcast, they got again, just amazing data where they have some technology where it can retarget people based off them having walked past a particular screen in a shopping center based off a device ID and a few other metrics, saying, "Hey, James has walked past my side here. When he gets home, I want to show him this TV advertisement as well." So the the power of these tools always continues to amaze, and our industry is just always moving at a million miles, and it's just about keeping up with all the possibilities and showing clients how they can better leverage them. And again, what I love, like it doesn't cost an arm and a leg to get into these things. We run connected TV campaigns for clients, and they're spending like $5,000 a month. You wouldn't, never would have heard about that if someone was looking to buy, actual TV
And
on.
the radio ads and the likes.
Yeah, yeah, it's unbelievable.
Um, I think it'd be good now to just talk B2B. Like,
Mhm.
what do you see with clients in complex spaces, very niche spaces? Uh, like, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, it's always an interesting one, right? So I always think that I think I think some marketers like to over complicate their marketing by saying, I'm a B2B marketer and my challenges are uniquely different to everyone else's. Where I don't know, you can challenge me on this if you want, James, but I still think it's kind of business to human in many ways. Like the things that work for a good B2C brand will often work for a good B2B brand. There will be differences, of course. Often, often with B2B, search is less impactful. Bottom of the funnel search because people aren't going to go, I'm going to buy an enterprise CRM and just go through and do a Google search and convert on that. Where if you're looking for an emergency plumber, you will. It might be one click, two comparative quotes, and away you go. But I think the key, like from a marketing standpoint, you still want to, whether it's B2B or B2C, you still want to build a great brand identity. You still need to know your customers. You need to know their pain points, and you need to be able to, speak to the benefits of your business product or service, in relation to those pain points. Social selling always works across both. I think if you, whether, particularly in the B2B space, like seeing other businesses which have leveraged technology X, Y, and Z efficiencies, which have come into it, same as someone who might be buying a supplement and sees those same things, reviews, all very powerful. There are a few kind of other areas you can explore B2B, like some of the aggregates, aggregator sites like Capterra, can
Mm.
be good for software comparisons or whatever. But I think those main things are building your brand, knowing your customers, mapping their pain points, having good advertising, being genuine as a brand. These are all the key things which still drive, good B2B growth. Um, so I don't like to kind of sort of put them in two different camps all too much. Yes, you might have longer sales cycles and there's things like you probably need to have a more invested, say, nurture strategy. So putting good content out there and you talk to your customers over a period of time. So where we are effectively a B2B agency, we need to put out good content. The old rule says that only 1% of your market is in market for services at any point in time. So what are we saying to the other 99% who aren't? We want to be having good we're putting good content out to them. So when it comes time for them to be in market for our services, they'll hopefully think of us and, bring us into um, you know, a, uh, a tender pitch scenario, or whatever it may be. So there are some things you have to do from a nurture standpoint, but I still think a lot of the basics, whether it's short sales cycle or longer, still all the same. You need to have a great website experience. You need people to be able to navigate your site and find out how the product works. Um, all these things are going to be just as important either way. So I don't know if
Yeah.
you feel differently to
Yeah.
me.
I think I agree mostly. Like I do. I think there is this B2B is fundamentally different to B2C. And I think it's because of what we think B2B is. We think of B2B as being the big 7-figure purchase, big ERP system, CRM system. And we think of B2C being the emergency plumbing example. When if Ali, our office manager, is buying toilet paper for the office, it's a pretty simple transaction. It's a decision panel of one, and it's a much simpler proposition than some that a husband and a wife deciding on which home builder to use to spend $1 million with. So I think there's definitely truth to but if we kind of go, let's think about the more complex side of B2B, bigger ticket items, think of them as that level of complexity of stakeholders on the decision making side, where it's a panel, it's 5 people, it's 10, it's 15, it's procurement, it's multidisciplinary versus 1 or 2 people in a private home. I
think
do
I just
think there's what's that, sorry?
I was going to say just on that point, this is often we'll have that conversation with our B2B clients just in terms of the ecosystem. So it's not all about driving conversion. It's more about how, what is the brand perception? So we're out, we're competing in this RFP. How do we actually, when people come through to do that validation check, how do we kind of put
Yeah.
our best foot forward as a business? So the website needs to look great. We need to have good messaging, have good remarketing, which follows people around. We're talking about people and culture. It's a great place to work and whatever else it may be. We've got good social ads, just talking about business
Yeah.
case studies. It's all of this, where it's just about building up a really good impression of our business. And I still think that's hyper valuable.
That's huge. And like, I think we referenced it on another episode of the pod. There's a Harvard Business Review study which looked at, it was purely B2B. And it was something like in 90% of B2B purchasing decisions, the successful company was already in the consideration set before the business went out to market. So it's kind of like if you're not already in that consideration set, when someone comes into market to buy the software or to be a new agency or whatever it might be, they might throw you in just as we need 5 instead of 3 quotes, but your chance of actually winning the deal is negligible. So
Correct.
you have to be there nurturing. And I think that's true of on the B2C front. If you're selling a car, BMW markets to 20-year-olds know they're not going to buy a car until they're 35 because most people aren't buying a BMW most months. So it's like when that time is ready to buy a luxury car, you've thought of BMW. So it's, I think any big ticket item, you need to be warming up the market, putting more effort into warming up the market than bottom of the funnel. I do think there is a context piece, which is, I think it's okay in B2B potentially to market on Facebook, remarketing, retargeting, but I do think it's more relevant to be marketing to someone contextually at a point when they're like, if you're watching the soccer at night, you might be more interested in your personal stuff than when you're on LinkedIn during the day. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't.
Factor, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. People want to have that, the brands being positioned at the right time.
I think that's right. I do think from a targeting viewpoint different though, which is, we touched on earlier on, there's some very light Google targeting capabilities with B2B. But my perspective is that like if you're trying to build an audience of geotechnical engineers working in WA that work in big mining companies, very difficult to do that through Facebook, Google. I'd be doing that through LinkedIn to try to identify my audience. I think search can obviously be a good way of identifying if the query itself denotes that level of seniority. Otherwise, programmatic, but we're doing some pretty interesting stuff in programmatic using the Oracle database to look at matched IDs of people in very specific B2B roles, which I think is equally as effective as LinkedIn, but you probably need more budget to do it.
And I guess at kind of the bigger end of town, you might see, I guess, on the B2B side, clients who are using CDP, so customer data platforms, that kind of unifying, centralized repository of customer information, looking at different activity across the line, which can help better inform their ABM, their account-based marketing strategies as well. So, it's clients that I see who are using, CDPs and doing proper ABM, it normally kind of, top 100 ASX companies who kind of can use, these types of marketing technologies well. You don't see it too much on,
Yeah.
I guess, in the mid-enterprise realm so much. People can often buy these things and they're under-leveraged and underutilized. But I guess that's some of the differences you might see from a B2C standpoint is people have these various technologies that can be leveraged for more nuanced messaging. Again, it's right message, right time, and these platforms can help internal
So
marketers or agencies kind of deliver those messages to those types of accounts.
that's it. But the next point is an interesting one. We were talking before we started recording, and this was one that you wanted to include. And I think it is interesting because when I think of targeting a prospect, I am thinking in an ad platform, how to find that person or how do they find us through search. But content, producing great content and how that can kind of help to actually find the right audience.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Like, you know, the old saying, content is king. So like with any advertising, I think I mentioned before, you want to entertain, you want to engage, you want to offer, really valuable information. This is where most businesses struggle to do it. So I think just spinning up a LinkedIn ad, just talking about some sort of USP proposition of the business is never going to be enough. And um, I'd reference Rocket in this case. So this very conversation today, like we're here today, like we love talking marketing, but this pod at the end of the day is to put great content out, present company excluded to to marketers in Australia. Hopefully we can give them good information. They go, I like what James is saying. I like the guest that he has on here. I like kind of the way that the Rocket talks, and hopefully that helps influence their decision that when they go out into market, that we might be part of their consideration mix. It takes a lot of time. Like we've got an internal marketer, they're doing outreach, they're getting guests onto the pod. You're investing a lot of your time as an agency owner to put this content together, and you're doing webinars with, the right types of publication networks like, B&T and Umbrella and Ad News and all of this kind of content marketing, which is outside of the performance, I think is really what drives a lot of the brand led
It
content stuff
does.
for the
Yeah, I think it's
agency.
right. And wouldn't have put it on my list of talking points, but it is true that creating content that impresses your ideal client inevitably gets shared and it gets shared to more of your ideal clients. So it is kind of it has this kind of echoing effect of continuing to find more and more people that you want to find.
Yeah. And it's definitely stuff that can be used, business wide. Like, so we'll have various various episodes of the podcast, and you might speak to a particular client who has a particular pain point and would say, hey, look, James just did a podcast on X, Y, and Z. You might find it interesting. So we're sharing, our content again out to people, I guess, from a more sales perspective. So you've got to spend the time creating this level of content. I think for any business, it's not that easy to go out there and start a podcast or a YouTube channel or whatever it may be. But yeah, I think it's putting the effort into, the best content you can possibly do as a business is ultimately what's going to help move the needle. So if your customers find it interesting, that they're much more likely to have conversations with you further down the track.
It's a good point. Before we wrap up, just any other novel, miscellaneous, kind of probably more ancillary platforms. We talked Capterra, which I think is really good if you're in the software space. If the space you're in exists in Capterra, it can be a really good place to advertise. We've had really good results for clients in the SaaS space there. Pinterest, I think, was one where we found
It's good, yeah, for clients
Yeah.
in the residential space. We've got a people who kind of, anything, home led. I think Pinterest can be really strong.
fashion, lifestyle, good.
Yeah. I know one of the things I made a bit of a list in terms of tips and tools because this conversation was about audience. So what are some of the things that I often use, I guess, when we're pre-sales in terms of, what can you leverage to find out where your customers are or what's happening? And things that we use like ad libraries can be really good. So Facebook, LinkedIn, you can go in there, you can find any advertiser who's actively advertising. And I think with LinkedIn shows historical ads as well. So you've got to find out what your competitors said are doing and saying. I think ad libraries are a great way to find out what are my competitors saying to, from an advertising standpoint. Google Trends can be interesting. So just, it's a basic tool. You can go on there, you can see differences. So think about topics within your industry, which might be, trending forward. We always had this interesting one many years ago back when it was the The same-sex plebiscite was kind of in the news at the time. Obviously, looking at the past, we had a client who worked in the jewelry space, and we did a lot of SEO work around same-sex wedding bans, kind of pre all that happening. So once everything got passed and more marriages were on the cards, they were ranking number one for that and sold a stack of wedding bans off the back of it. Different tools like SEMrush and SimilarWeb can be good in terms of just finding out. SEMrush can show you, ads that your competitors are showing, different content pieces, content cap analysis, all that kind of stuff. There used to be a tool called Moat, which is now owned by Oracle, which used to show you display ads. I think you can find that on similar ads. Again, social listening tools can be good. Social media insights for, different interests or demographics, which are performing. So again, like I think one of the things around your audience is what kind of messaging works well. So when you're testing ads, looking through the click-through rate, conversions from different messaging pillars that you have out in market can show what's actually resonating, with your audience. So that's a good little, I think most marketers, when you're working with your agency or internally, that's the stuff that you're doing day to day, but important to remember click-through rate, conversions, bounce rates of various ads based off content pillars out in market is really good. And then the last tip I have as well, because we probably won't cover it today, but, we talk about offline market research and qualitative research can often inform your strategy immensely. And if you don't have the tools to do that, pick up the phone and talk to your customers. And people just don't do that, right? People are afraid of telephones now. Gen Z won't answer their phone calls unless it's a text message. But one of the most powerful things you can do is pick up the phone, have a chat to your customers, talk about why they chose to work with you. And that's going to give you, a heap of insight. We certainly, as an agency, we've spent a bit of time recently doing a fair bit of market research into our customers. And I guess what we thought that customers were buying when they were, or what their pain points were is quite different to what they actually are. And what we found out is they want, one of their biggest bugbears is changes in account management or lack of transparency or not enough proactivity from their agency, right? Where you think it's, as a performance agency, they're always about results, but it's these kind of other factors which, greatly influence what they're buying and what they want. So I think for any business or marketer, if you have time, whether it's a sales team or yourself, pick up the phone, talk to people, find out, what bugs them, what their pain points are, why they chose to work with your business. And that's going to give you a lot of information in terms of, what you can start talking to with future prospects.
Nice one, mate. I couldn't agree more. So, Dave, you survived your first pod. And we have the question I ask of all my guests.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be audience related. It can be if you want it to be.
Right.
What's your one best piece of marketing advice for an Australian marketer?
Trust your gut. I mentioned it earlier on. I think we can talk to a lot of agencies. We can talk to people on the C-suite. People can feed us a lot of information, a lot of data points. But I think trusting what you think is the right thing to be saying to customers and where you think your customers are. You're in that role for a reason. Your audience. Trust your gut in terms of what you should be doing.
Love it, Dave. Thanks so much for coming onto the pod.
Thanks, James.